The fire truck sat 40 feet from the house, engine running, hoses coiled and dry. Ruth Caldwell stood on her front lawn in a cotton nightgown, barefoot on grass still wet from the sprinklers that had run at 9. She watched flames punch through the second-floor bedroom window where she had slept beside her husband for 31 years before he died. She turned to the 4 men in turnout gear standing near the truck. She said, "Please." She said the word 4 times, each time quieter than the last. Lieutenant Brett Whitmore looked at the house, looked at the woman, and keyed his radio. "Engine 12, hold position. Structures fully involved. Protect the exposure on the east side." The structure was not fully involved. The east exposure was a vinyl fence 60 feet away, untouched, belonging to a neighbor whose porch light had not even flickered on. Firefighter Cody Vance looked at Whitmore, looked at the house, looked at the woman standing on the grass in her bare feet, the bottoms dark with soil. "Lieutenant, the second floor is still tenable. If we hit it from the Alpha side, we can knock it down in 4 minutes. You pull that line," Whitmore said without turning around, "and you ride a desk until your pension dries up." Cody did not pull the line. Ruth Caldwell lowered herself to the ground on the front lawn, not collapsing, folding. The way a person folds when every part of them understands at the same time that no one is coming. Behind her, the bedroom window blew out. Glass scattered across the walkway. A framed photograph caught a draft of superheated air and lifted through the opening, spinning once, the glass face catching the orange light before it disappeared into smoke. Whitmore watched it go. "Some houses," he said to no one in particular, "you just let burn." He did not know whose house he was watching die. He would find out. 3 days earlier, Josephine Caldwell parked her state-issued sedan in front of 1744 Clover Hill Road and sat for a moment with both hands on the steering wheel, listening to the engine tick in the September heat. The maple in the front yard had dropped its first leaves early this year, scattered across the walkway like brown paper scraps from a lunch bag. She could smell her mother's rosemary through the cracked window, that sharp green scent that had been the first thing she noticed every time she came home for 30 years. Josie was the deputy state fire marshal. She had held the position for 3 years. Before that, she spent 7 years as a fire investigator in the Eastern District, crawling through collapsed structures with a flashlight and a cause and origin kit. Reading burn patterns the way some people read sheet music, she could walk into a gutted building and tell you within 20 minutes where the fire started, what fed it, and whether someone helped it along. She did not advertise any of this when she visited her mother. Here she was just Josie, Ruth's daughter, Theodore's girl. Her father, Captain Theodore Caldwell, had served 22 years with the Mill Haven Fire Department. He had been the first black officer in the department's history. He had trained 9 firefighters who went on to become officers themselves. On March 14, 2008, he entered a burning warehouse on Industrial Boulevard to search for 2 workers reported trapped inside. He found them on the second floor, behind a collapsed shelving unit. He got the first one out. He went back for the second. The roof failed while he was carrying the man down the stairwell. Theodore covered the man with his own body. The man survived. Theodore did not. The department named its training facility after him. His portrait hung in Station 4, where he had spent his last 9 years. Every recruit who came through Mill Haven learned his name in their first week. His widow still lived in the house he had bought with his first officer's salary. She had never considered leaving. Josie walked up the path, stepping over the maple leaves, and opened the screen door. The hinges sang the same 2 notes they had sung her entire life. Ruth was in the kitchen, standing at the stove, stirring something in the heavy cast iron pot that had belonged to her own mother. The kitchen smelled of onions softened in butter and the warm mineral scent of black-eyed peas. A gospel station played from a clock radio on the counter, the volume low enough that the music sounded like it was coming from another room or another decade. "You are 2 hours late," Ruth said without looking up. She tapped the wooden spoon twice on the rim of the pot. A habit. Always twice. "I had a site visit in Corbin County. Electrical fire in a feed store." "Feed store." Ruth shook her head. "Your father fought real fires." "My father would have loved investigating one. He used to say the best part was figuring out where it started." Ruth smiled at the pot. "He used to say a lot of things." Josie set her bag on the chair by the door, the chair with the slightly shorter left leg that rocked when you touched it. She noticed the stack of envelopes on the counter. Water bill. Gas bill. A letter from the Millhaven Fire Department Benevolent Association. And underneath, a notice from the city assessor's office. She picked it up. When did this come? Tuesday. The notice informed Ruth Caldwell that her property had been reassessed and her home's value had decreased by 38% due to, the letter read, neighborhood condition factors. Her property taxes would adjust accordingly. Her homeowner's insurance would adjust accordingly. Josie read it twice. The house was worth less now than it had been 5 years ago, according to the city. The house that Theodore Caldwell had maintained with precision, whose gutters Ruth still had cleaned every October, whose roof Josie had paid to replace 2 years before. She set the letter down and said nothing. She would look into it later. She folded it into her bag next to her investigation kit, between the incident report forms and the digital recorder she carried everywhere. That recorder would matter more than she knew. She slept that night in her old bedroom, the one with the ceiling her father had painted sky blue when she was 6, because she told him she wanted to see clouds when she woke up. The paint had yellowed over the decades. The clouds looked like they were aging with the house. At 7 the next morning, she stood in the front yard with coffee and watched Eleanor Marsh, the neighbor 2 doors down, walk her terrier past the Caldwell mailbox. Eleanor was 74, white, and had lived on Clover Hill Road for 40 years. She had brought a casserole when Theodore died. She brought one every March 14th since. "Morning, Eleanor." "Josie, saw your car, staying the weekend?" "Through Monday." Eleanor paused. Her dog pulled at the leash. "You should know. The Robinsons, 3 houses down, had a grease fire in their kitchen 6 weeks ago. Called 911. Took engine 19 minutes to get here." 19 minutes. The station is 4 minutes away. I know because your father used to time it. Josie looked at Eleanor. "You clocked it?" "I was sitting on my porch. I could hear Vanessa Robinson screaming. I called 911 myself. They told me a unit was already dispatched." Eleanor adjusted her grip on the leash. 19 minutes. By the time they arrived, her kitchen was gone and the living room was catching. Josie filed this in the part of her mind that sorted evidence before she knew she was building a case. That afternoon, Ruth took her to the basement to show her the water stain on the wall by the furnace. While they were down there, Josie noticed her father's old gear bag on a shelf. His turnout coat hung beside it, cleaned and pressed, with his name stenciled across the back in reflective letters. Caldwell. Beneath the coat sat a wooden box. Inside the box, arranged on black velvet, were his department commendation, his Medal of Valor, and his captain's badge, number 2207. The badge still showed a fingerprint smudge that Ruth had never wiped off because she believed it was Theodore's. Josie touched the box, closed it, placed it back on the shelf. She did not know that in 48 hours, the ceiling above this shelf would collapse. The fire started at 11:42 on Saturday night. Josie smelled it before she heard it. Not the clean wood smoke of a fireplace, the acrid chemical bite of electrical insulation burning. She was out of bed in 4 seconds. "Mama, get up! We need to move!" The fire had started in the east wall, behind the laundry room, where the original wiring from 1963 passed through a junction box that had not been updated since the house was built. By the time Josie reached the hallway, smoke was pooling against the ceiling like a gray tide rolling in from the wrong direction. She got Ruth down the stairs, out the front door, onto the lawn. Ruth was wearing the cotton nightgown she had worn every summer night for 15 years, the one with the tiny blue flowers along the collar. Her feet were bare, the grass was wet. It was 77 degrees, and the air tasted like burning plastic. Josie called 911 at 11:44. She gave the address. She gave her name. She gave her title. She said the words Deputy State Fire Marshal because she needed them to understand that she knew exactly what she was reporting. Engine 12 arrived at 11:58. 14 minutes from a station 1.7 miles away. Lieutenant Brett Whitmore stepped off the truck. He was 41, built like a man who lifted weights to look at himself afterward, with a sunburn across his nose that never quite faded. He surveyed the house. He surveyed the street. He surveyed the two black women on the lawn, one old and shaking, one younger, and standing perfectly still with a phone in her hand. He keyed his radio and said what he said. Josie watched 4 firefighters stand beside a truck and do nothing while her mother's home burned. She did not scream. She did not plead. She held her phone at her side with the voice memo running and let it record every word Brett Whitmore said into his radio, every order he gave, every second of silence between. She recorded him telling Cody Vance to stand down. She recorded him reporting the structure as fully involved when it was not. She recorded him requesting no additional units. She recorded 11 minutes of a house dying while 4 men with the tools to save it chose not to. At 12:09, a second unit arrived. Engine 7, dispatched from across town after a neighbor, Eleanor Marsh, called 911 from her porch and told the operator that the first crew was not fighting the fire. Engine 7's captain took one look at the scene and ordered an immediate interior attack. By then, the second floor was gone. The bedroom, the hallway. The bathroom where Josie's father used to shave every morning at 5 with the radio playing news. The closet where Ruth kept Theodore's dress uniform, pressed and covered in plastic, ready for a ceremony that would never come. The first floor survived. The basement survived. At 12:31, a white SUV pulled up to the curb. Chief Harold Sullivan climbed out. He was 56 and walked with the deliberate pace of a man who had learned a long time ago that running toward a scene made him look unprepared. He surveyed the trucks, the hoses, the ladder crew on the roof conducting overhaul. He surveyed Whitmore, who was standing by engine 12 writing something on a clipboard. Then Sullivan looked at the mailbox. The mailbox was black wrought iron, bolted to a cedar post Theodore had installed himself in 2004. The name on the side was painted in small gold letters. Caldwell. Harold Sullivan stopped walking. He stood on the sidewalk with both hands at his sides. His right hand began to shake, a tremor that moved up from his fingers to his wrist, and he pressed his palm flat against his thigh to stop it. He knew that name. He knew that name because Theodore Caldwell had carried him out of a burning warehouse 18 years ago with a fractured femur and second-degree burns across his back. Sullivan had been a 27-year-old probationary firefighter, pinned under a collapsed beam on the second floor, screaming into his mask, and Theodore Caldwell had crawled through 900-degree heat on his belly to reach him. Caldwell cut the beam with a rotary saw, dragged Sullivan 40 feet to the stairwell, and carried him down on his shoulders. Then Caldwell went back for the second man. Caldwell went back and did not come out. Sullivan owed his life, his career, his pension, his daughter's college education, and every morning he had opened his eyes since March 14, 2008, to the man whose family's home his department had just let burn. He walked to Whitmore. "Brett, what happened here?" Whitmore did not look up from his clipboard. Structure fire, fully involved on arrival. Standard exposure protection. Nothing to save, Chief. Sullivan looked at the house. The first floor stood intact. The garden hose was still coiled on the side porch. The kitchen window was closed and unbroken. Fully involved, Sullivan repeated. That's what I'll have in the report. Sullivan looked at the mailbox again. Looked at the name. Looked at Ruth Caldwell sitting on the lawn wrapped in a blanket someone from Engine 7 had given her. Ruth, who had invited Sullivan to dinner every Thanksgiving for 9 years after Theodore died, because she knew Sullivan carried the weight of surviving when her husband did not. Sullivan said nothing. He walked back to his SUV. He sat in the driver's seat for a long time. This was where a different man would have acted. Sullivan was not yet that man. Josie spent Sunday making phone calls. She did not file a formal complaint. Not yet. She was an investigator. She investigated. Her first call was to the dispatch center. She requested the CAD log for the call at 1744 Clover Hill Road. The dispatcher told her the log would be available in 3 to 5 business days. I am the Deputy State Fire Marshal. I need it today. Ma'am, our system is being updated. 3 to 5 business days. She called the Records Division. She requested response time data for Engine 12 over the past 18 months, broken down by address. The records clerk, a woman named Tammy, said she would have it by end of day. By end of day, Tammy called back and said she had been told by her supervisor to route all data requests through the city attorney's office. Someone had made a phone call between Josie's request and Tammy's answer. Monday morning, Josie drove to the address Vanessa Robinson's neighbor Eleanor had mentioned. The Robinson house, 1718 Clover Hill Road, still showed the damage from the kitchen fire 6 weeks earlier. The entire back wall of the house was covered in blue tarp. A for sale sign leaned against the porch railing. Josie knocked. Vanessa Robinson was 58, a retired school bus driver with reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. She stood in the doorway and looked at Josie's state credentials for a long time before letting her in. They took 19 minutes, Vanessa said. She was sitting at a folding table in what used to be her dining room. The walls were stripped to studs. The air smelled like damp plaster. I called at 8:22. They got here at 8:41. My kitchen was gone by then. My living room was going. Shh. Did you file a complaint? I called the station. Spoke to someone named Dennis. He said response times vary based on call volume and unit availability. Vanessa took her glasses off and cleaned them on her shirt. There was no other call. I checked. My neighbor has a scanner. No other calls went out that morning. Josie wrote everything down. She asked for the exact time, the unit number, the name Dennis. She found Dennis Pryor at Station 4 that afternoon. He was 38, freckled, soft-spoken. He brought her coffee in a paper cup and sat across from her in the break room with the posture of a man who wanted to be helpful. Lieutenant Whitmore runs a tight crew, Dennis said. If the response was delayed, it was probably traffic. Construction on Miller Avenue has been brutal. Miller Avenue construction ended in June, Dennis. The Robinson fire was July. Dennis blinked. Well, I would have to check the logs. I requested the logs. I was told to go through the city attorney. Dennis sipped his coffee. That's standard procedure for outside requests. I am not outside. I am the state fire marshal's office. Dennis set down his coffee. His expression shifted. Not unfriendly, but closed. A door shutting with a polite click. I think you should talk to Chief Sullivan about this. I will. He is a fair man. He will sort it out. Josie studied Dennis Pryor's face. Something behind that helpful expression was performing. She could not yet name what it was performing for. She drove to 3 more addresses that afternoon. She had pulled the data herself, bypassing the records division by accessing the state's mutual aid database, which logged dispatch times independently from the city's system. Engine 12 had responded to 47 calls in the past 18 months. The average response time to addresses in the predominantly white neighborhoods north of Miller Avenue was 3 minutes and 50 seconds. The average response time to addresses in the predominantly black neighborhoods south of Miller Avenue was 13 minutes and 40 seconds. Not once. Not occasionally. 47 calls. A pattern so consistent it could only be intentional. At 12:06, Birch Lane, she met Naomi Patterson, 45, a home health aide who worked 12-hour shifts at a care facility across town. Naomi's garage had caught fire from a faulty space heater the previous November. Engine 12 arrived in 17 minutes. By the time they came, my car was melted to the frame, Naomi said. She stood in her driveway, arms folded, looking at the rebuilt garage door. I needed that car for work. I lost 2 weeks of pay before my sister could loan me hers. Almost lost my apartment. Did you complain? To who? The fire department? I called. Nobody called me back. Do you remember who you spoke with? Somebody named Dennis. Josie stopped writing. Dennis Pryor. The same name. The friendly man in the break room. The man who brought her coffee and told her Chief Sullivan was fair. Dennis was not a bystander. Dennis was a filter. Every complaint that came in from south of Miller Avenue passed through Dennis, and Dennis made sure none of them went anywhere. That evening, Josie sat in her rental car outside Station 4 and watched Brett Whitmore leave at end of shift. He walked to his truck, a silver pickup with a thin blue line sticker on the rear window, and drove north on Miller Avenue. Josie followed at a distance. Whitmore did not go home. He drove to a steakhouse on Commonwealth Boulevard, walked in, and sat at a table with a man Josie recognized from the city website. Glenn Lassiter, city councilman, chair of the Municipal Services Committee, the committee that controlled the fire department's budget. They ate for an hour. Whitmore laughed 4 times. Josie could see them through the window from the parking lot across the street. She took 6 photographs. She did not yet know what the dinner meant. She would. Tuesday morning, Josie went back to see Naomi Patterson and found her standing at her front door, refusing to open it more than 4 inches. I cannot talk to you anymore, Naomi said through the gap. Her voice was flat in a way that did not match the woman Josie had spoken with the day before. What happened? Nothing happened. I just do not want to be involved. Naomi. What happened between yesterday and today? Naomi's hand was shaking on the door. Not fear of Josie, fear of something else. Someone came by last night, after you left, in a fire department vehicle. Told me if I filed a complaint, they would flag my property for code violations. Said my garage rebuild did not have a final inspection sign off. Said they could condemn it. Who came by, Naomi? Naomi looked past Josie at the street. The tall one, with the sunburn, Whitmore. Driving to a civilian's home in a department vehicle to threaten a black woman into silence. Not a delayed response time. Not a procedural decision. A man in a position of power standing on a woman's porch at night and telling her that if she spoke, he would take what she had rebuilt. Josie sat in her car and pressed her palms against the steering wheel until the vinyl creaked. She pulled out her phone and checked the time. She had 48 hours before the city insurance adjuster finalized Ruth's claim. If Whitmore's incident report stood, the official record would show a fully involved structure with appropriate response. Ruth would receive nothing. The house, the medals, the uniform, the photograph that had floated out the window and disappeared, all of it erased. Not by fire, by paperwork. She called the one person she had been avoiding, Harold Sullivan answered on the second ring. His voice sounded like a man who had been waiting for this call and dreading it equally. Chief Sullivan, this is Deputy State Fire Marshal Josephine Caldwell. Silence on the line. We need to talk about what happened at my mother's house. More silence. Then, a breath that sounded like it had been held for days. I know, Sullivan said. I know we do. They met at a diner on the county line. The kind of place where the coffee comes in beige ceramic mugs and the waitress calls everyone honey. Sullivan was already seated when Josie arrived. He had ordered nothing. His hands were flat on the table. I know what you found, he said before she sat down. I know about the response times. I know about Dennis routing the complaints. I have known for over a year. Josie sat down slowly. I told myself it was not as bad as the numbers looked. I told myself Brett was just lazy, sloppy, taking the easy calls first and dragging on the ones that did not have connected homeowners calling in favors. Sullivan looked at his hands. I told myself that because the alternative meant I had to do something about it. And doing something about it meant going against Glenn Lassiter, who controls my budget, and Brett Whitmore, who is Glenn Lassiter's nephew. Josie felt the room rearrange itself. Whitmore was not freelancing. He was protected. Lassiter controlled the fire budget. Lassiter's nephew ran the crew that decided which houses got saved and which houses got a clipboard and an excuse. The dinner at the steakhouse was not social. It was a check-in. Uncle and nephew, making sure the system still held. Gee, there is more, Sullivan said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder. Inside were printouts, property records, 5 addresses south of Miller Avenue. Each one had experienced a fire in the past 2 years. Each one had received a delayed response from Engine 12. And each property had been purchased within 90 days of the fire by a company called Millhaven Property Partners, LLC, at 30 to 40 cents on the dollar. Josie opened the folder. She recognized 2 of the addresses. Naomi Patterson's block, the Robinson House, now for sale. Millhaven Property Partners, she said. I'd registered to a trust. I could not find the beneficiary. But the trust's registered agent is a law firm on Commonwealth Boulevard, 3 doors down from the steakhouse where Brett meets Glenn every Tuesday. Josie stared at the printouts. 5 families, 5 fires, 5 delayed responses, 5 properties purchased at a fraction of their value, and a city councilman whose nephew decided which houses burned and which ones did not. Why are you telling me this now? Josie asked. Sullivan did not answer immediately. He picked up the menu, looked at it without reading, and set it back down. Because I stood on the sidewalk Saturday night and saw your father's name on that mailbox. And I remembered what it felt like when your father's hands grabbed me in that warehouse. When his hands were the only thing between me and dying on a concrete floor at 27. Sullivan's voice did not crack. It went somewhere lower. Somewhere that costs a man something to visit. I have spent 18 years telling myself I honored Theodore's memory by doing this job well. But I watched his family's house burn, and I did not say a word. I went home. I sat in my kitchen. And I understood that everything I believed about myself was wrong. Josie took the folder. You know what this costs you. My career, my pension if they go after me for dereliction, my reputation, and you are giving it to me anyway. Your father gave me 50 more years of being alive. I have been wasting them. Josie spent Tuesday night in her rental car with her laptop, her investigation kit, and the folder Sullivan had given her. She cross-referenced the property records with the dispatch logs from the state database. She pulled the incorporation records for Millhaven Property Partners from the Secretary of State's website. The registered agent was a firm called Lassiter & Cole, Glenn Lassiter's firm. The councilman was not just protecting his nephew. He was profiting from the fires his nephew refused to fight. Delayed responses, damaged homes, desperate sellers, below-market purchases, and a city council seat that ensured no one audited the pattern. 5 families had lost their homes or sold them under duress. 5 families in black neighborhoods south of Miller Avenue. 5 families whose 911 calls were answered with a shrug and a clipboard. Josie pulled one more record. The reassessment notice her mother had received. She traced it to the city assessor's office, which operated under the Municipal Services Committee. Glenn Lassiter's committee. The committee had quietly reassessed 14 properties in the same neighborhood over the past 2 years. Every one of them belonged to a black homeowner. Every assessment reduced the home's value. Every reduction made it easier to purchase after a fire, and harder for the owner to rebuild. The system was not a few bad decisions. It was an engine. Whitmore was the ignition. Dennis was the muffler. Lassiter was the fuel. And the families south of Miller Avenue were the road it drove over. Wednesday morning, Josie filed an emergency petition with the state fire marshal's office to convene a review board. She submitted the dispatch data, the property records, the incorporation documents, Sullivan's folder, and her own audio recording from Saturday night. Every word Whitmore had spoken, every second of silence while her mother's house burned. The review board convened at 4 that afternoon in the Millhaven Municipal Building, a brick structure on the corner of Main and 4th, with tall windows that let in the kind of light that makes every surface look exposed. Present were the state fire marshal, the county fire investigator, 2 members of the State Oversight Commission, the Millhaven city attorney, and, seated in the front row because Josie had arranged for their subpoenas personally, Brett Whitmore, Dennis Pryor, Glenn Lassiter, and Harold Sullivan. Ruth Caldwell sat in the second row. She wore the navy blue dress she kept for Sundays. Her shoes were polished. Her back was straight. She had brought nothing with her except a small leather wallet that held Theodore's captain badge, number 2207, which Josie had retrieved from the basement that morning. The basement had survived. Josie walked to the front of the room. She wore a charcoal suit with her state credentials clipped to her jacket. She did not introduce herself with a speech. She set a laptop on the table, opened an audio file, and pressed play. Whitmore's voice filled the room. Engine 12. Hold position. Structures fully involved. Protect the exposure on the east side. Then a pause. Then Cody Vance's voice. Lieutenant, the second floor is still tenable. If we hit it from the alpha side, we can knock it down in 4 minutes. Then Whitmore again. You pull that line and you ride a desk until your pension dries up. Then silence. Then distantly, the sound of glass breaking. Then nothing. Josie stopped the recording. She let the room sit in the quiet. The clock on the wall above the door read 4:07. Outside, a bus pulled away from the stop, its air brakes releasing with a long exhale. The house at 1744 Clover Hill Road was not fully involved when Engine 12 arrived, Josie said. Fire involvement was limited to the east wall of the second floor. A standard interior attack would have saved 80% of the structure. Lieutenant Whitmore ordered his crew to stand down. He filed a report characterizing the house as a total loss on arrival. That report is false. She advanced to the next slide on her laptop. A spreadsheet. Response times. 47 calls. 2 columns. North of Miller. South of Miller. Over the past 18 months, Engine 12 under Lieutenant Whitmore's command has maintained an average response time of 3 minutes and 50 seconds to predominantly white neighborhoods north of Miller Avenue. To predominantly black neighborhoods south of Miller Avenue, The average response time is 13 minutes and 40 seconds. She let the numbers sit. She did not explain them further. Numbers that clear do not need narration. Brett Whitmore sat in the front row with his hands on his knees. His face had not moved since the recording started. He looked like a man who had decided in advance that nothing in this room could touch him. His eyes were on the wall behind Josie, focused on a point slightly above her head, as if she were not worth the effort of direct eye contact. Glenn Lassiter, seated 2 chairs away from his nephew, adjusted his tie. A small gesture. Practiced. The gesture of a man who has survived uncomfortable meetings before. Josie advanced to the next slide. Property records. In the past 2 years, 5 properties south of Miller Avenue have been purchased by Millhaven Property Partners, LLC, within 90 days of a fire at that address. Each fire received a delayed response from Engine 12. Each property was purchased at 30 to 40% below assessed value. She let the next slide speak for itself. The incorporation filing for Millhaven Property Partners, the registered agent, Lassiter and Cole. The registered agent for Millhaven Property Partners is the law firm of Lassiter and Cole, whose founding partner is Councilman Glenn Lassiter, who also chairs the Municipal Services Committee that oversees the fire department's budget and the city assessor's office that determines property values in the affected neighborhoods. Lassiter stopped adjusting his tie. His hand moved to the armrest of his chair and stayed there, fingers pressed into the wood. Whitmore looked at his uncle. It was the first time his eyes had moved since the hearing began. The look was not concern. It was the look of a man checking to see if the net beneath him was still there. Josie turned to the room. Councilman Lassiter's committee reassessed 14 properties in black neighborhoods south of Miller Avenue over the past 2 years. Every reassessment reduced the property's value. Every reduction lowered the insurance payout available to the homeowner after fire damage. And every reduction made the property cheaper for Millhaven Property Partners to acquire. She paused, reached into her bag, pulled out a single sheet of paper, and placed it face up on the table. It was a purchase offer for 1744 Clover Hill Road, dated the previous Monday, 2 days after the fire, addressed to Ruth Caldwell, offering $62,000 for a house appraised at $189,000 3 years earlier. The offer was from Millhaven Property Partners, LLC. Ruth Caldwell, in the second row, looked at the paper on the table. She did not speak. She reached into her leather wallet and took out Theodore's badge and held it in her lap with both hands. The room was still. Someone's shoe scraped against the floor. A pen rolled off a table and hit the carpet without a sound. They were going to buy my mother's house, Josie said. The house my father bought. The house he left from on March 14, 2008, to go save 2 people trapped in a warehouse fire. One of those people is in this room. She looked at Harold Sullivan. Sullivan stood. He stood slowly, the way a man stands when he knows that the act of standing is the last easy thing he will do for a long time. Theodore Caldwell saved my life, Sullivan said. His voice carried the specific weight of a sentence that has been rehearsed for days, but still arrives heavier than expected. I was 27 years old, pinned under a beam, and he crawled through conditions that no manual would authorize entering to pull me out. He went back for the second man and did not survive. Sullivan turned to face the panel. I have known about the response time disparities for over a year. I was informed by a firefighter who came to me confidentially. I did not act. I did not act because Councilman Lassiter controls my department's budget and Lieutenant Whitmore is his nephew, and I calculated that keeping my position allowed me to do more good than losing it. That calculation was cowardly and wrong. I am submitting my resignation effective today, along with all records in my possession documenting the pattern. He placed the manila folder on the table in front of the panel. Whitmore was looking at the floor now. Not at his uncle, not at Sullivan. At the carpet directly in front of his shoes. His right knee was moving, a rapid, small bounce that he could not seem to stop. The state fire marshal spoke for the first time. "Lieutenant Whitmore, you are suspended immediately pending a full investigation by this office and referral to the district attorney. Councilman Lassiter, this matter is being referred to the State Attorney General's office for investigation of fraud, abuse of public office, and civil rights violations." Lassiter opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I want to speak with my attorney. You may, from outside this building. Your access to municipal systems is revoked effective now." Josie watched two officers escort Lassiter out through the side door. He walked between them with his shoulders pulled back and his chin raised, the posture of a man performing dignity for whoever might be watching. No one was watching. The hallway was empty. Whitmore was escorted out next. He walked with his head down. At the door, he turned and looked at Ruth Caldwell. Their eyes met for 2 seconds. Ruth did not look away. Whitmore did. Josie walked to her mother. She did not say anything. She sat down beside her, put one hand on Ruth's arm, and with the other hand took Theodore's badge from Ruth's lap and pinned it to the lapel of Ruth's navy dress, over her heart, where it caught the light from the tall windows. Ruth put her hand over the badge and held it there. Cody Vance was waiting in the lobby when Josie and Ruth walked out. He was in civilian clothes, a t-shirt and jeans, standing by the water fountain with his hands in his pockets. "I should have pulled that line," Cody said. Josie looked at him. "Yes, I was afraid of losing my job." "I know. That is not good enough." "No, it is not." Cody nodded. He looked at Ruth. "Mrs. Caldwell, I am sorry. I will testify to whatever they need." Ruth looked at this young man who had stood 40 feet from her burning house and done nothing. She studied his face for a long time. Then she reached out and straightened the collar of his t-shirt, a small, precise gesture, the way she might have fixed her own son's collar before church. "Then testify," she said. 6 weeks later, the Millhaven City Council voted to dissolve the Municipal Services Committee and establish an independent fire department oversight board with civilian representation. Response time data was made public. Every call, every unit, every address, updated monthly on the city's website. Brett Whitmore was charged with dereliction of duty, filing a false report, and obstruction. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts in exchange for a reduced sentence. He received 18 months of probation, a permanent revocation of his firefighter certification, and a civil judgment that barred him from public service employment in the state. He moved to a rental apartment in a town 90 miles away where he knew no one. His wife filed for divorce 3 months later, citing irreconcilable differences. His 2 sons, 11 and 8, visited every other weekend and sat in his living room watching television in a silence that had nothing to do with the volume. Glenn Lassiter was indicted on 7 counts of fraud, 3 counts of abuse of public office, and 1 count of conspiracy. His law practice dissolved within a week of the indictment. His partners released a statement that did not mention him by name. His seat on the city council was vacated. No one ran to fill it for 2 months. Dennis Pryor resigned before the investigation reached him. He took a job as an insurance adjuster in another county. At his exit interview, he said he had always followed proper procedure. The investigator who reviewed his complaint routing records found 22 reports from black homeowners that Dennis had marked as resolved without any follow-up action. Dennis did not return calls from the media. Harold Sullivan's resignation was accepted. He lost his pension. He took a part-time job teaching fire science at the community college. On the first day of class, he told his students the story of Theodore Caldwell, and the warehouse fire. He told them what Caldwell did. He told them what he himself failed to do 18 years later. He said the worst fire he ever witnessed was not the one that almost killed him. It was the one he watched burn from his SUV because he was afraid of what saving it would cost. Naomi Patterson received a full insurance settlement after the state ordered a review of all claims connected to Engine 12's service area. She used the money to repair her garage and buy a car, a used Honda with 60,000 miles on it. The first morning she drove it to work, she sat in the parking lot for 5 minutes with the engine running, just feeling what it was like to have something that worked. The Robinson family received a settlement as well. Vanessa Robinson used part of it to repair her kitchen. She took down the for sale sign. She was not leaving. Eleanor Marsh continued walking her terrier past the Caldwell mailbox every morning. She told everyone she met about the 19-minute response time. She told the cashier at the pharmacy. She told the man who delivered her newspapers. She told the new city council member who knocked on her door during a campaign visit. She would not stop telling people. She did not intend to. Cody Vance testified before the oversight board. He described what he saw. He described what he was told. He described the line he did not pull. The board offered him a commendation for his testimony. He declined it. He said he had not earned it. He transferred to Station 7 and started volunteering on weekends with a community fire safety program south of Miller Avenue, teaching residents how to check their smoke detectors and identify electrical hazards. He was not trying to make up for Saturday night. He knew he could not make up for it. He was trying to make sure it did not happen to someone else while he stood there watching. Ruth Caldwell's house was rebuilt. The state fire marshal's office, after reviewing the evidence, classified the fire as accidental electrical failure, compounded by negligent emergency response. Ruth's insurance company, presented with the state's findings, approved a full claim. The second floor was rebuilt. New wiring throughout. The bedroom window was replaced. The basement was untouched. Theodore's gear bag still hung on the shelf. His turnout coat, still pressed, still bearing his name in reflective letters. The wooden box with his commendation, his Medal of Valor, and his captain's badge, number 2207, with the fingerprint smudge Ruth never wiped away. On a Saturday morning in November, Josie drove to Clover Hill Road. She parked in front of the house. The maple had lost most of its leaves. The walkway was covered in them, red and gold. She could hear the gospel station through the kitchen window, turned up higher than Ruth usually played it. She walked up the path. The screen door sang its 2 notes. Ruth was at the stove, stirring something in the cast iron pot. She tapped the spoon on the rim twice. "You are late," Ruth said. 30 minutes. Your father was never late." My father drove faster than the speed limit. Ruth smiled at the pot. Through the kitchen window, the late autumn sun hit the mailbox at the curb. The gold letters caught the light. Caldwell. Still there. Readable from the street. Josie sat at the table, in the chair with the short leg that rocked when she leaned back. She listened to the gospel station and the scrape of the wooden spoon and the wind pulling the last leaves off the maple. Some houses you do not let burn. Have you ever watched someone who should have helped you choose to look the other way? Not a stranger. Someone whose job it was. Someone you trusted with your safety. What did that silence cost you? And when you replay that moment in your mind, what do you wish you had said? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story made you feel something you were not expecting, hit subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Every voice in the comments, every share, every notification bell keeps these stories reaching the people who need them most.